The miracle doctor won't be a kept man. My heart belongs ashore. Chapter 831. It was already afternoon, and the sunlight bathed Kirin Mountain in a golden hue, making the beautiful landscape shimmer as if coated in gold. From a distance, Kirin gazed at Kirin Mountain, which resembled a mythical Gillen lying down, its exposed back covered in lush greenery along with the constructed temples and roads. Their previous visit to Kirin Mountain had been to its more desolate rear side. This time they approached from the front. As Kirin looked at the mountain, he thought of the demonic fetus inside Wendy Kruger. It was clear that the fetus had absorbed a great deal of spiritual energy from the environment and was on the verge of maturation. The most crucial reason was its absorption of the incense offerings here. Kirin Mountain's incense seemed to nourish the demonic fetus directly. The most vigorous offerings came from Sunland citizens, leading Kirin to speculate that the demonic fetus was related to Sunland, probably linked to the ghosts he had encountered and eliminated before. Even before arriving, Kirin's intent to kill was already stirring. Yvonne, sensing his intense, murderous intent, gently patted his leg. Kirin managed to contain his emotions, adopting a calmer demeanor as they approached the mountain. Upon reaching the mountain base, they saw many cars queued up outside the parking lot, all blocked from entering. Despite the vast parking area being empty, it was clear that these vehicles were not permitted to enter. Drivers rolled down their windows, cursing loudly, some even honking their horns in frustration, all to no avail. It was as if they were being ignored. Just then, a convoy approached from behind Kirin's car. The vehicles, bearing the flags of Sunland, moved slowly towards them. Seeing the convoy, the security guards blocking the cars became visibly anxious and started directing the queued vehicles to make way. However, the traffic was too dense for any movement. The guards wanted the cars at the back to move aside to create space, so they approached Kirin's car, which was at the end of the line. Despite Kirin's evident anger, the guards seemingly didn't notice and knocked forcefully on his car, demanding, "Move your car to the side." Kirin raised an eyebrow but remained silent. Yvonne, clearly displeased, retorted, "Isn't this already to the side?" The guard, momentarily hesitant upon seeing Yvonne's ethereal yet sickly beauty, soon urged more forcefully due to the imminent arrival of the convoy. "You are blocking the way now. All vehicles need to make way for the convoy." "What's the reason?" Yvonne asked with a frown. The guard, frustrated by her repeated questions, snapped, "Move now!" Without saying another word, Kirin turned off the engine, removed the keys, and stepped out of the car, followed by Yvonne. They both clearly disregarded the guard's demands. Enraged, the guard yelled, "Are you deaf? Didn't you hear me?" His shout drew the attention of other guards, who all turned to face Kirin and Yvonne. Kirin ignored them and turned to look at the convoy from Sunland, which included people sticking their heads out, dressed unmistakably as Sunland citizens. Seeing this, Kirin's anger intensified, convinced of the connection between this place and the demonic fetus. Noticing Kirin's disregard, one of the guards shouted to his colleagues, "Push this car into the ditch!" "What's wrong with this guy? Is he crazy?" another guard muttered as he approached. Yvonne stood still, her face showing a cold smile. "I advise you to keep your distance or you might get poisoned." "I'm already poisoned," one guard leered at Yvonne. "Buy your love potion?" He touched his chest in a vulgar gesture, eyes fixated on Yvonne's legs. "Ha ha ha ha." Laughter broke out among the guards, their eyes gleaming with lewdness. Yvonne's eyes flashed with annoyance, but she restrained herself, her lips curling into a cold smile. "Do it now," the lead guard urged, anxiety in his voice as more than a dozen guards began to push against Kirin's Lamborghini, intending to move it into a ditch. "You've been poisoned," Yvonne stated calmly. "Do you think we're children to believe that?" The guards scoffed in disbelief. "Then push harder," the lead guard grimaced, shouting in pain. "I've been trying," another guard claimed, but he felt inexplicably weak. "My God, why are my hands turning black?" one of the guards screamed in horror. The faces of the other guards turned pale as they, too, looked at their hands, expressions of shock and fear spreading among them. The once arrogant guards now stepped back, looking at their hands and futilely trying to shake off the black substance. "Believe you're poisoned now?" Yvonne's voice remained even. "You, who are you? How did you poison us?" the guards demanded, looking at Yvonne angrily. "I'm from Dragon Country," Yvonne sneered, her gaze sweeping over the approaching convoy. "Cure us quickly. Don't hold up the convoy or you'll never visit Kirin Mountain again," another guard threatened angrily. "You should be asking me for help," Yvonne countered coldly, fury built in the guard's eyes. "If you don't cure us, we'll kill you." The lead guard shouted, and the others stood up, ready to assault Yvonne. "It seems you don't know the pain yet?" Yvonne's face showed a cold smile, her hand waving lightly. The guards suddenly felt as if their bodies were frozen, immobilized in place. Expressions of astonishment and shock appeared on their faces as they looked towards Yvonne. Just then, a well-dressed young man from the convoy stepped out and shouted towards the guards, and Yvonne, "What are you doing?" With the young man's shout, anxiety and anger appeared on the faces of the scene's guards. One of the guards shouted, "Young Master Murphy, come help us!" Hearing the shout, young Master Murphy's face darkened as he approached. Seeing young Master Murphy approaching, the other vehicles in the queue, like mice seeing a cat, hurriedly started their engines, eager to escape. Chapter 832. Kirin was standing next to a car. The driver, quite amiable, rolled down his window and said to Kirin, "Buddy, you better drive off quickly. This is young Master Murphy from the Murphy family, one of the 4 major families of Dragon City." "The Murphy family? Young Master Murphy?" Kirin asked, interested to confirm the identity. The driver nodded vigorously. "This young Master Murphy is Dale Murphy, the future head of the Murphy family, and he is very powerful. However, he's known to be ruthless and vicious. You definitely don't want to cross him." After the driver spoke, he saw Dale approaching and, frightened, quickly pulled his head back in and started the car, preparing to move it. Others looked at Kirin with sympathy in their eyes. Although they were irritated by the security's orders to move their cars, they now saw it was Dale Murphy and dared not complain. In front of such a prominent figure, they felt utterly insignificant, especially recalling an incident where a novice female driver was dragged out of her car by young Master Murphy's people for blocking the way and then taken away. What happened to her afterward was unknown, except that she ended up as a hostess in a nightclub. Who wouldn't be afraid of such a figure as young Master Murphy? As Kirin watched Dale Murphy approach, a man in his late 20s with a fair, handsome face that bore a resolute and cold expression, his interest was piqued. At this moment, whether due to anger or irritation, Dale's gaze was sharp. Kirin, seeing this man, smirked slightly. It seemed this was Dragonsland's lackey for Sunland. Considering how the Carter family and Philip Wise were lackeys for a foreign country, it made sense that the Murphy family would be Sunland's. With this realization, everything seemed less surprising. Kirin felt even calmer, filled with anticipation for his visit to Kirin Mountain. Dale, ignoring Kirin's gaze, walked up to Yvonne. His eyes assessed Yvonne, and he was visibly surprised by her beauty. His eyes lit up as if he wanted to envelop her in his arms. Yvonne, feeling Dale's intrusive gaze, did not evade but instead offered a slight smile. Her beauty was breathtaking, and her smile was like 100 flowers blooming, seemingly welcoming Dale's advance. Dale's heart skipped a beat seeing Yvonne's beauty, but he suppressed his excitement and said politely, "Miss, please make way. Our convoy needs to pass." Yvonne, recognizing Dale's patience, flashed him a charming smile and gently brushed her cheek with her hand. Her action was enchanting, filling her with allure. Dale's heart trembled violently as he watched her, asking, "If you want to go up Kirin Mountain, you can ride with me." Yvonne appeared contemplative, lightly massaging her temple, her delicate allure shining even in her apparent frailty. Dale, though enchanted, maintained his composure as important people were behind him. "Our car is blocking the way. Aren't you angry?" "I don't like getting angry at beautiful women," Dale replied subtly, his eyes showing admiration as if to convey his tolerance for her. Yvonne laughed. "You handle beautiful women with such grace." Dale, not at all offended by Yvonne's self-description as a beautiful woman, nodded and acknowledged, "Who wouldn't be impressed by such beauty?" "But you restrained yourself from me, aren't you aggrieved?" Yvonne probed further. "Not at all. For a beauty, I am willing," Dale responded, eager not to miss this opportunity to flirt. Many beautiful women surrounded him, but none were at Yvonne's level, nor did they possess her unique allure, which could evoke a man's protective instinct and offer an exceptional charm. Thus, he was keen to seize the opportunity to win her over. Yvonne looked at the guards who were poisoned but dared not scream. Seemingly forgetful, she asked, "What's this mountain called?" The guards, frustrated, still responded, "This is Kirin Mountain. Kirin Mountain?" "The shape looks more like a turtle shell to me," Yvonne remarked. Everyone's expression changed, all eyes turning to Dale. Yvonne continued, looking at Dale, "You resemble this mountain, like a turtle." Her voice was not loud, but its sweet, penetrative power ensured that many in the vicinity heard her. Drivers, startled by her words, accidentally collided with other vehicles, causing a series of alarms to go off. Everyone thought, she dared to insult Dale Murphy? Dale, initially in a good mood, thinking he might win a beauty, stood dumbfounded, unable to react. Did someone dare to insult him and call him a turtle? This mountain indeed resembles you, capable of contracting and stretching. Yvonne added, thinking Dale hadn't heard her clearly. Dale's anger surged to his head, his gaze icy as he retorted, "You're pushing your luck." "What do you mean by pushing my luck?" Yvonne pointed behind her at Kirin Mountain and said, "This is our Dragon's Land's mountain. This is our land. Do we Dragon's Land people need to make way for others here?" Dale's face darkened as he declared, "This mountain belongs to the Murphy family." "Does that mean it's no longer Dragon's Land's land? Isn't your family from Dragon's Land?" Yvonne pressed him further. "Take this woman away," Dale, unable to save face, commanded loudly. Immediately, several subordinates approached to lay hands on Yvonne. Yvonne pointed at the guards, reminding them, "They just tried to push my car away and look, they're poisoned." The approaching bodyguards paused, looking at Dale for instructions. Dale, his face a mix of rage and embarrassment, demanded, "Who exactly are you?" "I am a person of Dragon's Land," Yvonne replied mockingly, looking at the vehicles behind Dale. Dale, realizing Yvonne was mocking him, frowned deeply. "I'm giving you a chance to leave now. Don't let me see you again." "And if I don't leave?" Yvonne challenged. "Then don't blame us for being inhospitable." Dale's expression turned utterly dark, signaling his men to proceed. Standing by, Kirin returned, asking coldly, "You're telling us to leave?" Dale, already furious and not caring who Kirin was, shouted, "Leave!" Thud. Kirin kicked Dale to the ground with one swift move. Everyone was stunned. Speak up and get insulted, act up and get hit. What a scene. Chapter 833. Kirin stood beside a car as the scene unfolded. Yvonne, standing next to him, clapped her hands and cheered, "Wow, hubby, you're so manly." Her usually pale face flushed with excitement. Dale Murphy, the young master of the powerful Murphy family in Dragon City, let out a cry of pain and fell to the ground, clutching his abdomen and curling up like a shrimp. His bodyguards were too stunned to react immediately. As for the other security guards, they were dumbfounded. They had never imagined that Kirin would dare to strike someone so boldly, especially someone as untouchable as the young master of the Murphy family, a figure whom countless others in Dragon City would fear and step back from. However, to Kirin, he was nothing. Kirin's gaze remained fixed on Dale. Recovering slightly, Dale, fueled by raging anger, pointed at Kirin and demanded, "Who are you to lay a hand on me?" Kirin, unfazed, walked over and looked directly into Dale's face. "Protect the young master." Finally reacting, the bodyguards shouted as they surged towards Kirin. "Get back!" Kirin bellowed. The bodyguards felt as if a blast of air had hit them, forcing them to retreat. Dale felt his eardrums might burst from the reverberating echo. Kirin's gaze hardened. "Is this Murphy family's land or Dragon's Land's?" Dale, trying to maintain his composure despite many onlookers, responded coldly, "It doesn't matter where this is. What matters is that you apologize right now and get lost." Smack. Before Dale could finish his domineering remark, Kirin slapped him across the face. Dale's cheeks swelled instantly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with teeth. Kirin's cold eyes met his. "Answer my question. In your daydreams!" Dale spat back angrily, looking to his retreating bodyguards and shouting, "Attack him!" "You're the ones looking for death." Kirin, confident and unbothered, moved swiftly among the bodyguards. His leg moved like a swaying branch, striking the bodyguards with such force that they flew backward, landing on the hoods of cars in the convoy. The once majestic fleet of black cars was now blaring alarms, severely dented, likely beyond repair. Those who had planned to leave now stopped their cars and stared at Kirin in awe, as if they were witnessing a monster. "This is Dragon's Land's land. This is Dragon's Land's Kirin Mountain," Kirin declared coldly to Dale. Feeling the powerful aura emanating from Kirin, Dale found himself unable to respond. "Damn it!" The doors of the convoy flew open, and a group of Sunland nationals stepped out, cursing loudly. One of the Sunland nationals, apparently a leader, walked towards the scene with a group following him, their eyes filled with anger. Seeing the approaching Sunlanders, Kirin's lips curled into a smirk. It was Fukada, someone who always seemed to flee upon seeing him. Kirin deliberately turned his body slightly to keep Fukada from recognizing him immediately. Dale, seeing Fukada, cried out as if seeing a savior, "Fukada, come quickly and deal with this guy." Fukada thought Kirin's back view was familiar as he approached, but felt a surge of anger for the mission he had come for. Without hesitation, he coldly said to Kirin, "Apologize and compensate us immediately, or this won't end well." "Kid, you better apologize quickly or you're finished." Dale now felt emboldened and yelled at Kirin. Many sympathized with Kirin. The Murphy family, as one of the four major families of Dragon City, was formidable, and now, with Sunland national support, Kirin seemed to be in big trouble. However, Kirin seemed deaf to the threats, and his attention was still fixed on Kirin Mountain. Ignored, Fukada grew furious and ordered his men, "Attack, take him down!" "Hi!" His men responded and dispersed, preparing to strike Kirin. "Kid, you're screwed now, wait for your death." Dale laughed excitedly, anticipating Kirin being beaten down. Kirin, a beautiful and sexy Sunland woman by Fukada's side, suddenly spoke up. Hearing the name Kirin, Fukada's head buzzed, his face turning pale instantly. Before his men could react, they had already launched their attack towards Kirin. Fukada, recognizing the man before him was indeed Kirin, rushed over and pushed Kirin aside. Thud! 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 The punches intended for Kirin landed on Fukada instead. He let out a wail of pain as his men's punches hit him instead. The men, seeing their boss taking the hits meant for Kirin, were shocked and confused, their faces turning pale as they realized their mistake. Despite his own pain, Fukada quickly moved to Kirin's side and spoke respectfully. "Mr. Kirin, greetings." Fukada's respectful address stunned everyone present, including Dale, who was lying on the ground. The sight of Fukada treating Kirin with such deference was unexpected. Especially for Dale, it felt as if his fury had been forcibly swallowed back, causing him both nausea and immense frustration. "I am not well," Kirin declared. At this, Fukada, overwhelmed by fear and respect, immediately knelt before Kirin. Everyone watching was stunned by this development. "Fukada, have you mistaken something? This guy deserves to die." "Deserves to die." Fukada turned towards Dale and yelled back with a fire in his eyes that made it clear he thought it was Dale who deserved to die, not Kirin. Dale, intimidated by Fukada's fury, recoiled and didn't dare to speak further. Fukada then looked to his companion Aoki Kosner, hoping she would speak in his favor. Kosner, seeing Kirin, was visibly delighted and quickly approached him, bowing respectfully. "Mr. Kirin, it's so good to see you. And what brings you to Dragon's Land again?" Kirin's tone softened considerably towards Kosner. Kosner's face lit up with a happy smile. "I came here with Fukada." Fukada, smiling obsequiously, looked up at Kirin as if waiting for orders, a clear subordinate in the presence of a superior. Kirin was somewhat taken aback, realizing the depth of the influence behind the ninjas, and said, "It seems there's a powerful force behind the ninjas." Chapter 834. The previous battle with the Sunland nation had left the ninjas severely weakened. Under normal circumstances, these ninjas would not dare to make a move again. However, their presence here now, especially when the ghost fetus was only 3 days away from maturation, clearly indicated they had a purpose. Kirin surmised that someone powerful must be controlling everything from behind the scenes, perhaps even involved in the resurrection of the ghost fetus. His suspicion was evident as he fixed his gaze on Fukada, asking pointedly, "What are you here for?" "We are here to pay our respects," Fukada hurriedly explained. "To pay respects to what?" Kirin pressed, clearly skeptical. "Just to offer incense and pray?" Fukada responded, his voice tinged with a hint of urgency, perhaps fearing Kirin's disbelief. He glanced at Kosner Aoki, hoping she would corroborate his statement. Kosner also quickly added, "Really, we are just here to pay respects." Kirin, however, was not convinced and asked directly, "Who sent you to do this?" "Kanpei Ichiro," Fukada quickly replied. "Kanpei Ichiro is our first martial artist in Sunland," Kosner added, perhaps worried Kirin was unaware of his prominence. "The first martial artist?" Kirin's tone was mocking, clearly showing his disbelief. Remembering Kirin's strength and how he had effortlessly defeated the third-ranked Ichiro Matsubara, Kosner blushed but nodded in affirmation. Fukada, kneeling on the ground, didn't dare speak against Kanpei Ichiro in front of Kirin, but he was more afraid of Kirin's formidable power. Kirin's victory over the Ninja Association on Mount Futu had shocked all of Sunland. Many in Sunland's martial arts circles secretly wished for Kirin's death, as his continued existence was a nightmare for them. "Why didn't he come himself?" Kirin inquired further. Both Kosner and Fukada shook their heads, indicating they didn't know. "Why such a big entourage, then?" Kirin gestured towards the convoy behind them. "The Murphy family arranged this," Fukada explained quickly. Kirin turned his gaze to Dale Murphy, whose face still registered shock and confusion, unable to comprehend why Fukada and others were treating Kirin with such respect. Out of frustration, he tested the waters. "Are you the Kirin who fought against the Sunland ninjas?" Kirin didn't respond verbally, but his silence was as good as an affirmation, which only deepened Dale's fear. Known more for his playboy lifestyle than as a future patriarch concerned with family legacies, Dale had not paid attention to the earlier battle. In his view, real men were those who could wield power and seduce women, not those who engaged in battles and killings. "And your Murphy family has good relations with Sunland?" Kirin didn't answer Dale's inquiry but instead posed his own question with a sneer. Dale's expression fluctuated, and he turned to Fukada with a loud voice. "Fukada, don't you feel ashamed to kneel and beg him?" Fukada's face turned cold as he glared at Dale. "You should be dead." Fearing Kirin's anger, Fukada quickly explained, "I didn't know your car was in front until just now. Otherwise, I would never have ordered you to make way." Dale, feeling the heat on his face and his heart in his throat, had been emboldened by the situation to question Fukada. Now, seeing Fukada's respectful behavior towards Kirin, how could he not be frightened? "From now on, I want Kirin Mountain," Kirin suddenly declared. "On what basis?" Dale challenged loudly. "Shut up, die!" Fukada shouted at him. Dale trembled in fear and swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. "I have no objections." Fukada quickly looked at Kirin and said respectfully. Kirin York looked at Dale. "Help me settle the procedures for Kirin Mountain." "You." Dale's face was filled with anger and humiliation. "If you can't finish it in an hour, you'll never see Kirin Mountain again," Kirin York warned coldly. "You're dreaming," Dale scolded angrily. Although Dale did not know what use this Kirin Mountain had, he knew that the Murphy family in Sunland valued Kirin Mountain very much. Of course, he would not give it to Kirin York. Thud! Cosner, who was standing at the side, stepped forward and kicked Dale's waist. "Ouch!" Dale let out a miserable scream as he looked at Cosner, but he did not dare to make a sound. "Hurry up and do the paperwork," Fukada ordered Dale again. Dale flinched, swallowing his words as he fumbled with his phone to make a call. After explaining the situation on the other end, he abruptly hung up. As he listened to the dial tone, a look of expectation crossed his face. He knew the other party was angry. Dale looked back at Kirin and said indifferently, "I've notified them about Kirin Mountain." Kirin saw through Dale's reluctance to handle the situation but chose not to engage further. The scene fell quiet. Meanwhile, someone began discreetly recording the unfolding events with their phone, capturing Kirin's imposing figure, a figure that many in Sunland had only seen in videos and pictures, where his dominance was well noted. Less than 15 minutes later, the roar of an engine signaled the arrival of a Rolls-Royce. The car stopped and a tall, elderly man stepped out flanked by 8 bodyguards. The elder's gaze first fell on Kirin. As their eyes met, Kirin's brow furrowed slightly, recognizing the strength of another powerful figure. The elder moved towards Kirin with a light step, his bodyguards in tight formation behind him. Their arrival changed the atmosphere completely, bringing a palpable pressure that weighed heavily on everyone present. Seeing the elder, Dale shouted with a grin, "Grandfather, avenge me!" Chapter 835. The bodyguards of the Murphy family and others looked expectantly at the elderly man approaching. Mr. Murphy's gaze sharply landed on Kirin's face. Kirin felt as though 2 arrows had struck his face, sharp and fierce, exuding intense killing intent. However, he calmly and composedly met the gaze. The two stared at each other for a few seconds before the elder's gaze slowly shifted to Fukada, who was kneeling awkwardly on the ground. Fukada had been highly esteemed by the Murphy family and treated very well. Yet now he found himself kneeling in front of Kirin. "Mr. Fukada, are your legs uncomfortable?" the elder asked, offering Fukada an excuse. Fukada's face turned even more embarrassed, fluctuating between red and white, unsure of how to respond. The elder, seeing that Fukada didn't answer, chuckled and said, "If there is any discomfort, perhaps the miracle doctor could examine you." After speaking, he looked towards Kirin and continued, "Miracle doctor, renowned for his dual expertise in medicine and martial arts, I believe can surely cure Mr. Fukada's legs." With these words, he provided Fukada with enough of a stepping stone to maintain his dignity while subtly trying to bridge the gap with Kirin. His razor-sharp look faded as if it had never existed. Dale, kneeling on the ground, looked confused and watched the elder. Kirin, seeing the elder's facade of composure, smiled coldly. "Mr. Fukada, are your legs really uncomfortable?" This left Fukada in an even more difficult position. The Murphy family had given him face, and if he did not maintain his dignity, it would be even more humiliating. Yet, he could not face Kirin's strength. The elder's brow furrowed, clearly not expecting Kirin to press the issue so directly. He quickly attempted to divert attention again by turning to Dale and asking, "Dale, does your stomach hurt?" "Grandfather, he kicked me in the stomach," Dale pointed at Kirin and complained. "Are you being too playful?" the elder asked, his tone tinged with displeasure as he tried to control his anger. Dale, utterly baffled by his grandfather's demeanor, kept shifting his gaze, trying to understand his grandfather's intentions. The elder looked at Kirin and said with a smile, Young Master York is renowned worldwide. I assume he wouldn't take offense at the actions of a younger one. After his arrival, the elder's actions completely baffled everyone. He seemed like a peacemaker, as if trying to smooth things over and calm everyone down. Kirin's lips curled into a cold smile, not believing the elder would keep up his act. Since he had provided an excuse for Fukada, it was time to focus on Dale. Kirin then said, "Your grandson behaved poorly, which angered me, so I disciplined him." The elder's eyebrows furrowed at this, but quickly relaxed as he responded, "Young Master York is entitled to discipline. I have no objections." "Grandfather," Dale cried out anxiously, his eyes filled with anger and humiliation. The elder shot him a sharp look that silenced him immediately. "I intend to take over Dragon's Mount. I've told Dale to complete the paperwork within an hour, or else his life is forfeit," Kirin stated flatly. The elder's eyes sharply changed, but he restrained himself and asked calmly, "Does young Master York need money? If so, I can provide it." "I do not need money, I want Dragon's Mount," Kirin responded, looking up at the towering mountain. "Why is young Master York interested in Dragon's Mount?" the elder asked, his face darkening. "If I said I was merely curious, would you believe me?" Kirin asked with a half-smile. "Of course not," the elder replied truthfully. "Then why ask?" Kirin retorted. "Is young Master York trying to bully our family by using his strength?" The elder inquired. "Is the Murphy family that weak?" Kirin asked back. "You are pursuing our family for Dragon's Mount. Doesn't that suggest we are weak?" The elder replied. Kirin did not respond to this, but instead turned to a car and commanded, "Driver, come here and slap Dale." The driver inside the car, hearing this, recoiled and quickly locked the doors, too frightened to comply. Kirin then looked at another car, and its driver reacted similarly. Soon, a series of locks clicking echoed around the area. Kirin turned back to the elder and stated, "It seems no one thinks the Murphy family is weak. They are all quite afraid of your family." The elder did not take this as a compliment. His expression turned even colder as he offered, "Young Master York, if you want money, I can give you 10 billion. "I want Dragon's Mount," Kirin repeated, pointing at the mountain. However, he thought to himself that the Murphy family placed high importance on this mountain, indicating it held some significant secrets. "Gentlemen, do not take what others treasure. If young Master York insists on having Dragon's Mount, I can provide it, but I have a condition," the elder said, his voice tinged with anger. "What is the condition?" Kirin asked, smiling. "I will give you Dragon's Mount and 10 billion if you let this woman marry my grandson," the elder pointed at Yvonne Quinn. Yvonne's face immediately lit up with a smile, seemingly intrigued by the offer. Dale, lying on the ground, was astonished his grandfather had made such a proposal. He looked at Yvonne's pale face with admiration, thinking how wonderful his life would be if he could spend a night with her. The thought of revenge against Kirin also crossed his mind. Kirin scoffed coldly. "It seems you do not wish to give it." "It is young Master York who does not wish to accept," the elder responded impassively. "I no longer want the 10 billion. I just want Dragon's Mount." "No marriage," Kirin declared. "To obtain Dragon's Mount, you must give woman in exchange," the elder stated firmly. Kirin's gaze grew cold, and an impasse seemed to form between the two. Everyone at the scene looked at Kirin and the elder. Fukada, still kneeling, felt embarrassed, not expecting the elder to be so assertive. Kirin's anger flared, and he stared down the elder. "Is the Murphy family refusing to give it?" "It is not that the Murphy family does not want to give, but that young Master York does not sincerely want it," the elder explained, his gaze sweeping around the group. "Our family is significant, and meeting young Master York today was an opportunity to form a sincere connection. But young Master York must also show a minimum of respect for our family, shouldn't he? What if I insist on taking it by force?" Kirin's tone became harsh. "If you insist, this issue may be unresolved," the elder replied, his tone firm. "It seems you are quite confident," Kirin observed, his anger rising. The elder maintained his composure, pressing down his anger, and stated, "If young Master York insists on forcibly taking Dragon's Mount, I believe the people of the world would not support it." "What use is the approval or disapproval of the world?" Kirin asked coldly. "Is young Master York willing to disregard the world for his own desires?" "How many have disregarded the world for their own desires?" Kirin countered. The elder returned Kirin's gaze. "It seems we cannot persuade each other." "That is indeed the case," Kirin confirmed. "Shall we settle this with 3 moves?" the elder suggested coldly. Chapter 836. Kirin chuckled upon hearing Elder Murphy's declaration of a challenge. The old man was no longer hiding behind pretenses, displaying a frank and direct demeanor. The elder waved his hand. Fukada, who was kneeling on the ground, felt as though a force was lifting him up, and he managed to stand. "Fukada's legs are injured," We can seek treatment when we return, Elder Murphy said, providing a convenient excuse for Fukada. Fukada wiped the sweat from his forehead nervously, stealing glances at Kirin, worried about provoking his anger. Kirin, however, ignored him and kept his focus on Elder Murphy. Elder Murphy, composed and serene, countered Kirin's gaze. If young Master York can defeat me in 3 moves, Kirin Mountain will be yours, he announced to everyone. Our Murphy family keeps its word. If we lose, the mountain is yours. He then added, however, if young Master York cannot defeat this old man in 3 moves, please abandon your claim to Kirin Mountain and agree to marry this lady to my grandson, Dale Murphy. Elder Murphy laid out his terms, looking expectantly at Kirin for a response. Kirin met his gaze squarely, surprised by the old man's audacious but seemingly unfazed demeanor. Yvonne watched the exchange with an amused smile. Indeed, the 4 great families of Dragon City are all remarkable, Kirin commented. He shifted slightly, his eyes still fixed on Elder Murphy. Please proceed. Elder Murphy stared at Kirin with the intensity of a hunter eyeing his prey. He slowly raised his hand, an action that seemed more ceremonial than threatening. The crowd watched intently, curious about the outcome of these 3 moves, especially since Elder Murphy's capabilities were unknown to even his own family. Yet they were all aware of Kirin's formidable reputation. He was someone who single-handedly took on the Ninja Association of Sunland. Elder Murphy's hand moved forward in a gentle arc, reminiscent of a Tai Chi master devoid of any visible strength. His palm approached Kirin slowly and made contact with his arm. It was a touch devoid of any aggression, more akin to an elder's gentle pat than a strike. Kirin raised an eyebrow, puzzled by Elder Murphy's lack of force. He could sense that there was more to Elder Murphy than met the eye. Pulling back his hand, Elder Murphy stepped away and laughed heartily. Indeed, young Master York is not only powerful but also wise beyond his years. He paused, then declared, Kirin Mountain, we shall gift it to young Master York. The crowd gasped in unison. The anticipated clash had not materialized and Elder Murphy was conceding without a fight. His behavior from beginning to end baffled everyone. Dale, in particular, was stunned, rubbing his eyes to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. The Murphy family attached great importance to this Kirin Mountain, and Sunland attached great importance to it. Was his grandfather going to give it away just like that? Young Master York is famous all over the world. He must have his reasons for wanting the Kirin Mountain. Of course, our Murphy family has to fulfill his wish. Elder Murphy spoke magnanimously. You all prepare the paperwork, Elder Murphy instructed one of his bodyguards. Yes, sir, the bodyguard acknowledged and left to handle the arrangements. Turning back to Kirin, Elder Murphy said, once the paperwork is complete, Kirin Mountain will belong to you. Kirin merely smiled, neither grateful nor surprised. He was certain that there was a catch to Elder Murphy's sudden generosity. Elder Murphy didn't expect Kirin to be so calm and unresponsive. He allowed a hint of frustration to show. Let us return home, he said to Fukada and the others. Someone went forward to help Dale Murphy up. As the party prepared to leave, the onlookers remained in shock. The once animated scene around Kirin Mountain had quieted down suddenly. Yvonne approached and hugged Kirin's arm, teasing, My husband is so formidable! Kirin rolled his eyes. Even a fool can see there's a trap here. Then don't be a fool, Yvonne replied, looking up at him with her large, expressive eyes. Kirin's expression grew solemn. Unlike the straightforwardness of the Carter family's elder, Elder Murphy was proving to be a cunning adversary, akin to a fox that could not be easily read. As they walked towards Kirin Mountain, they passed other hikers descending the path. These people seemed unaware of the drama that had unfolded below, their faces filled with contentment as if they had achieved what they sought from the mountain. Maybe this mountain does have some spiritual power, granting people what they wish for, Yvonne speculated half-jokingly. If it truly had such powers, it would have been flattened from all the foot traffic by now, Kirin replied, dismissing the notion. You really know how to spoil the mood, don't you? Yvonne playfully pinched him, which Kirin took in stride, continuing their ascent. As they climbed, Kirin reflected on Elder Murphy's seemingly ineffectual slap. It had been so gentle, yet now he could see 5 distinct black fingerprints on his arm, an unmistakable sign of poison. Yvonne noticed his discovery and exclaimed in anger, Did that old man poison you? Chapter 837. Kirin remained calm and did not speak. Instead, he lifted his arm and sniffed it lightly but detected no odor. He pulled out a silver needle and pricked the discolored area gently. Even with the injection of internal force, no black liquid came out. Isn't it poisoning? Yvonne's beautiful face was full of surprise. Kirin was also slightly curious. He frowned and looked in the direction the Murphy family had left, lost in thought. If these marks were left by internal force, then that old man's martial arts are truly unfathomable, Yvonne recalled the gentle, seemingly effortless slap from Mr. Murphy, looking at Kirin to remind him. Kirin's expression grew more solemn as he muttered to himself, I didn't expect such a master to exist. I wonder if there's a scheme behind this, Yvonne asked Kirin. Whatever it is, let's first take a walk up Kirin Mountain and talk about it, Kirin suggested, regaining his composure. Yvonne nodded in agreement, and they headed towards Kirin Mountain. They arrived relatively late, so many people were already descending the mountain, which meant fewer people were around as they climbed. Kirin Mountain was not highly developed, but the asphalt road was well maintained. However, this road was now closed to vehicles and only open to pedestrians. Kirin and Yvonne walked along the mountain path, appearing like a couple on a trip. If it had been before, Yvonne would have clung to Kirin like a happy little woman. But now, her brows were furrowed, frequently glancing at Kirin's arm. Kirin's arm showed no further changes, but the 5 finger marks had not disappeared either. Yvonne, seeing that Kirin had tried to use his internal force to dissolve them without success, was filled with worry. Eventually, they reached a large temple. It was already late afternoon. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the temple, enhancing its mysterious ambiance. The air was thick with the scent of incense rising from the burners, stretching upwards. As Kirin and Yvonne reached the temple gate, they found it locked. Yvonne gently knocked, but no sound came from inside. She turned to Kirin with a questioning look. Kirin reached out, broke the lock, and pushed the door open. The temple was silent and empty. Did your arrival scare everyone away? Yvonne teased Kirin to lighten the mood. Kirin shook his head and walked towards the main hall. The incense burner in front of the hall was filled with various incense sticks, the thick scent permeating the air. Yet there was no sign of life. Kirin reached the entrance and looked inside at the large Buddha statue. The statue seemed serene, almost as if embodying a world-embracing compassion. Kirin glanced at it and felt an inexplicable calm. Yvonne, half-jokingly, said, If I pray here, do you think we could really become a married couple? Kirin, less amused by her romantic notions, replied, Why don't you try it and see? All right then. To Kirin's surprise, Yvonne actually knelt on the cushion, clasped her hands together, and bowed her head in prayer. Just as she was about to raise her head, the ground beneath her seemed to vanish. She fell through a trapdoor with a scream. Kirin instantly turned and reached out to grab her, but only caught her clothing, which slipped through his fingers as she fell. He tried to jump after her, but the trapdoor had already closed seamlessly. Frustrated, he kicked the cushion away and inspected the floor, but it was perfectly intact. He stomped on it, but it didn't budge. Increasingly desperate, Kirin picked up the heavy incense burner and slammed it down on the floor, but it had no effect. The realization that he had missed a trap so ingeniously hidden left him feeling both anxious and self-reproachful. Turning his thoughts back to Mr. Murphy, Kirin wondered about the man's motives and the temple's secrets. Convinced that the agreement to hand over Kirin Mountain was part of a deeper plot, he decided to search the hall for mechanisms or clues, but found nothing. As he left the main hall, he encountered Kate Gannon, the Imperial Dragon Inspector. This surprised him, but given her timely appearances in the past. Last time, she had given him 2 high-speed cars. He hoped she might provide some insight today. Why are you here? Kate asked first. Kirin asked, Have you been to this temple before? Kate did not understand why Kirin asked, but she nodded truthfully and said, I was here. What's wrong? That's great. Come in with me. Kirin grabbed her hand and pulled her. Her hand held tightly by Kirin. Kate's beautiful and mature face surged with shyness. However, she was a little angry when she saw that Kirin did not have any protective feelings for her. Kate retracted her hand forcefully and pretended to be angry. Why are you pulling me? Kirin, more interested in immediate concerns than pleasantries, responded bluntly. Yvonne just fell through a trap here while praying. Know anything about it? A trap. Here. Kate's surprise seemed genuine, and she quickly became serious. You didn't manage to break it open? She asked after noticing the damaged incense burner. It's tougher than steel, Kirin replied, his frustration apparent. Maybe you've been handling too many women and your strength's gone, Kate teased, trying to lighten the mood despite the tense situation. Cut the nonsense, Kirin snapped, not in the mood for jokes. Kate smirked. If something were to happen to Yvonne, wouldn't that be better for you? No one to nag you then. It wouldn't be your turn, Kirin retorted, coldly dismissing the implication that he would welcome Yvonne's absence. Chapter 838. Kate Gannon almost burst with fury at Kirin York's comment, silently cursing, Am I really such an undesirable woman? Nevertheless, she managed to hold back her anger, crossing her arms and coldly addressing Kirin. "If I ever get the chance, I'd definitely take care of you. Rest assured, you won't have that opportunity," Kirin replied with a cold laugh. "You think you can take me down with your paltry skills? Dream on. What I meant was I'd have you in bed, not kill you." Kate rolled her eyes, bold in her assertion. Kirin paused, surprised by her boldness. Kate's cheeks also flushed. She had seen the opportunity to express her feelings, given the secluded, quiet mountain setting. Disappointed by Kirin's lack of response, she quickly moved to where Yvonne Quinn had fallen, hoping to cover her embarrassment by pretending to be busy. Kirin watched her, not out of admiration but out of concern that the trap door might open again and cause Kate to fall as well. Thankfully, nothing happened. Kate searched for a long time but found nothing. She looked up at Kirin and asked, "Are you sure you saw what you saw?" Annoyed, Kirin rolled his eyes. "Do you think I'd hallucinate? Yvonne Quinn disappeared right here." "Who knows? Maybe you're seeing things from indulging too much every day," Kate retorted disdainfully. Kirin didn't want to argue with her, knowing how seriously she took these discussions and how tiresome they could get. He rolled up his sleeves to continue searching. Kate noticed the 5 finger marks on Kirin's arm and was momentarily startled, stepping closer. Kirin explained without hiding anything. "That old man from the Murphy family, I don't know what game he's playing. He slapped me so lightly, yet it left these 5 clear finger marks." Kate's brows furrowed deeply. She didn't speak, but reached out to touch Kirin's arm gently. If he hadn't seen her serious expression, he might have thought she was taking advantage of him. After examining it closely, she suddenly matched her right hand to the finger marks on his arm. Just as Kirin was about to ask why, the ground beneath them started cracking, and both felt like they were being lifted into the air. Instinctively, Kirin thought to jump away, but remembered Yvonne had fallen here. He took a deep breath and jumped downward, following the opening. Kate, losing her balance in panic, naturally wrapped her arms around Kirin's neck. Kirin didn't push her away, but instead held her tightly, fearing any danger from the fall. When Kate saw that Kirin did not push her away, she took the opportunity to press herself against him, her legs wrapped around her waist. The trapdoor closed again. There was total darkness where they fell. When they landed, they felt that the entire ground seemed to be soft and cushioned their fall. Kirin thought about letting Kate go. "Husband!" Yvonne's sweet voice suddenly came from behind Kirin. "Are you all right?" Kirin asked with relief. "I would have been in trouble, but now that you're here, I'm fine," Yvonne cooed back at him, playful and affectionate. Relieved, Kirin's face brightened with joy, but Kate, just having enjoyed a similar closeness, reluctantly let go of Kirin, somewhat wistfully. Just as she touched the ground, she exclaimed in alarm, "What is this softness?" Neither Kirin nor Yvonne responded. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, Kirin scanned around, but the darkness was too thick to see through. However, the ground beneath their feet was unnaturally soft, like standing on a giant cushion. "I felt this softness when I fell too. If not for it, I might have died," Yvonne shared with Kirin. Kirin inhaled deeply. "Do you smell something fishy?" Yvonne shook her head. "I don't smell anything fishy, do you?" Kate, her brow furrowing, also took a deep breath and added, "I don't smell anything fishy either." "This place is not right. We need to find a way out quickly," Kirin concluded as he held Yvonne close. Yvonne naturally leaned into Kirin York's arms. Kate, who had just enjoyed such treatment, seemed to have become an extra person. Although she was a little angry and unhappy, there was nothing she could do. After all, Yvonne was the woman who pestered Kirin every day. As if validating her earlier suspicion, Kate couldn't help thinking, men never change, always looking at what's in the pot while eating from the bowl. Silently cursing Kirin for his fickleness, she stood up, trying to appear brave despite her inner turmoil. Unaware of Kate's thoughts, Kirin suggested, "Let's head east." The women nodded, and they moved carefully over the bizarrely soft ground. Initially tense, their anxiety eased as they walked without further incident for about 15 minutes. However, they eventually detected a strong, foul odor. "It really stinks now, and it's quite strong," both women noted almost in unison. Kirin's expression grew severe, and he held up a hand for them to stop. "Hold on, don't move." After a tense few seconds, he divulged, "We're standing on something alive, and it's very long." Alive, long. Both women instinctively thought of a snake, shivering at the thought of how massive it must be. As they contemplated this, the ground beneath them began to shift, and a chilling wind carrying a strong fishy odor nearly overwhelmed them. All three stared wide-eyed as a massive head emerged from the darkness. Chapter 839. A snake! A giant snake's head loomed large in the already cramped cave, transforming the space in front of them into a wall of flesh, completely blocking their path. The pungent stench was so overpowering that it almost made them vomit. In a moment of panic, possibly due to an innate fear of snakes or feeling protected by Kirin, Kate screamed and clung to Kirin, wrapping her arms around his neck and her legs around his waist in a suggestive embrace. However, her thoughts were far from romantic. She was desperate to meld her body into his for safety. While Kirin was initially focused on the snake, Kate's sudden full-body contact nearly overwhelmed him. In contrast, Yvonne was calmer, accustomed to handling various poisons and snakes from a young age. Yet even she was visibly shaken by the sheer size of the snake's head. "If you don't want to die together, get off now," Kirin snapped impatiently, trying to pry Kate off him as she clung in terror. "I'm scared," Kate admitted, her voice trembling after the initial shock had worn off. "Afraid of a snake when you've faced death in bed without fear," Kirin retorted sarcastically. Flushed with embarrassment and irritation at Kirin's rough manner, Kate managed to compose herself as the whooshing sound of the approaching snake grew louder. "If you don't get down now, I'll feed you to the snake," Kirin threatened, pulling at her back to toss her aside if necessary. "Are you even a man?" Kate shot back indignantly, finally letting go. With Kate no longer hindering him, Kirin turned to confront the snake. The cave was shrouded in darkness, but he could make out the vast, gaping mouth of the snake, its smell nauseating. He struck the snake's upper jaw with a punch that only made the beast pause. The impact felt like hitting stone, sending a numbing shock up his arm, especially where Elder Murphy's mysterious handprint had previously marked him. Ignoring the pain, Kirin retreated a few steps and shouted for the women to fall back. Yvonne quickly grabbed a disoriented Kate and pulled her away. Kirin continued to throw punches at the snake's head, his attacks thunderous but ineffective. Each strike drained his strength, worsened by the aching in his arm from Murphy's slap. The snake, frustrated by the failure of its assaults, swung its massive head wildly, striking the cave walls as it lunged at Kirin. He dodged swiftly while throwing silver needles into the snake's body below. Although he couldn't see the effects clearly, the snake's violent thrashing suggested intense pain. As Kirin dodged another strike, the snake's head hit him hard. The snake's body writhed like it was caught in a storm. Ah! Both Yvonne and Kate nearly fell from the shaking ground, their bodies lifted as if on a seesaw. They collided with the cave walls, screaming in pain. Kirin rushed over, scooped them up, and sprinted to the back of the cave. The brief respite from pain seemed to enrage the snake further, which resumed its attacks with renewed fury. They soon found themselves at a dead end. The snake's tail, sharp as a sword, thrashed about, threatening to impale them. "This must be a python, and a terrifyingly large one," Yvonne whispered to Kirin, trying to keep calm. "What can we do now?" Kate, usually so bold, was near tears with fear and urgency. "Didn't expect you to be such a coward," Kirin scoffed, dismissing her fear. "As long as the snake doesn't eat us and we can get out, I'll do anything, even sleep with you," Kate blurted out, driven by fear. Kirin, though tempted to rebuff her offer with disdain, held back as the snake's enormous head approached once more. "What do we do? We have no weapons," Yvonne observed, realizing their punches couldn't damage the snake's sturdy head. Although he still could not see clearly, he could vaguely see that the head was as black as a huge basin. The saliva and venom-like liquid that dripped out were disgusting. "Just stay calm. They've got several silver needles in its body," Kirin reassured them, trying to spot a way to strike effectively. As the snake opened its mouth for another attack, Kirin quickly shot 2 more needles into its mouth. The snake screamed in agony, its head striking the cave's ceiling so hard that the whole space seemed to quake. Yet the ceiling held firm, unscathed. "What is this ceiling made of? It's incredibly tough," Yvonne wondered aloud. "I don't know, but it's stronger than anything we've punched or smashed," Kirin replied, rubbing his sore arm. Then he suddenly remembered the handprint Kate's hand had covered his, and triggered the mechanism that opened the passage to this cave. "How did you know that those handprints would open the door to the underground?" Kirin asked Kate. "I didn't know. I was just curious about the handprints, so I touched them," Kate responded, a bit irritated. "Then why don't you let it go again and see if the door above can be opened? If the room can, we can escape." Despite her fear, Kate reached out to touch the handprints again, hoping to trigger the mechanism to open the trapdoor. She shone her phone's flashlight on Kirin's arm, her hands trembling as they touched the marks. Her cheeks flushed and she looked away from Kirin, embarrassed but hopeful. When she placed her fingers on Kirin York's palm, her hand trembled as if it was electrocuted. Unfortunately, the trapdoor remained firmly shut. The snake hissed again, furious and ready to strike. Chapter 840. Kirin, feeling a mix of disappointment and rising anger at not being able to open the door, decided to take action. He positioned Yvonne, Quinn, and Kate Gannon safely behind him, his gaze fixed sharply on the menacing snake. With the flashlight that Kate had switched on, Kirin could now see the snake clearly. It was a vivid red. The snake opened its mouth, revealing its inner maw lined with bright red blood vessels, which nearly made Kirin sick to his stomach. His earlier silver needle attack had left the snake's mouth dripping with a mixture of saliva and blood. "Snakes are cold-blooded, right?" Kate asked, her voice tense. "Just because it's cold-blooded doesn't mean it doesn't have blood," Kirin scoffed, readying another needle. As he launched the needle at the snake's mouth, the snake, learning from its previous mistake, twisted its head, using its skull to deflect the needle. The needle clinked against the snake's head as if it had struck metal, then fell to the ground. The snake's scales were as hard as iron. Kirin wondered how his earlier needles had managed to penetrate the snake's body when he had been escaping. It was puzzling. As the snake's head came dangerously close, Kirin had no choice but to punch directly at it. His fists landed with a thud, but the impact sent him flying backward, Yvonne and Kate included. Just before hitting the ground, Kirin twisted in mid-air, positioning himself to land on his back, cushioning the fall for both women. With a solid thump, they landed on him, both of them inadvertently planting kisses on his cheeks in the chaos. Yvonne seemed quite pleased, playfully licking his cheek, while Kate blushed deeply, embarrassed by the accidental intimacy. As the snake lunged at them again, Yvonne suddenly stood up, decisively taking charge. "Hubby, let me handle this," she declared. Kirin paused, surprised as Yvonne pulled out a handful of white powder, some kind of toxic concoction. She threw it at the snake's head. Initially, the snake didn't seem bothered, but soon it started thrashing wildly as the powder made contact, indicating severe irritation or pain. The white powder turned into numerous tiny creatures that began burrowing into the snake's flesh, creating visible wounds. The snake tried in vain to shake them off, its scales flapping open and shut in distress. "What kind of poison is that?" Kirin asked, both impressed and horrified. "It's the brain zombie goo," Yvonne explained with a slight smirk. "I modified it a bit. It doesn't just eat brains now." Kirin couldn't help but be amazed at the effectiveness of the modified poison. "I thought brain zombie goo was supposed to eat brains," he commented. "With a few tweaks, it can eat much more," Yvonne replied, watching the snake succumb to the relentless attack of the tiny creatures. Seeing that the snake was almost weakened, Yvonne relaxed and deliberately teased Kirin. "Just like how men still like men." Kirin could not help but roll his eyes. He hurriedly pulled Kate up and stood up. "You should have taken out this brain zombie goo earlier." I would have been less worried. Kirin was also rather afraid of this snake and could not fight it. "Aren't I telling you that you're not incomparably powerful?" Kirin looked at Yvonne, speechless and angry. Yvonne smiled and winked at Kirin. "I'm also warning you. If you don't treat me well, I'll make you like this snake one day." After saying that, she even gently flicked her beautiful hair with her fair hand, and said arrogantly to Kirin, "Snakes still have snake scales. Their self-protection ability is not inferior to yours at all, but didn't I also deal with them?" Kirin was speechless at Yvonne's thoughts. He said, "Let's study how to get out." He really didn't want to continue this topic. "We should extract its gallbladder. It's valuable," Yvonne suggested. "Do you have a knife?" Yvonne asked. "I don't have a knife." "Why? I have a knife here." Kate handed a short knife to Kirin. Kirin nodded and, using the knife Kate provided, carefully made an incision near the snake's belly. The creature writhed in pain but was too weak to fight back. He extracted the large gallbladder, noting its unusual size. The gallbladder was 7 to 8 caddies heavy. It was as if a big watermelon had been placed in the snake's body. "This gallbladder could be used for medicine," Yvonne noted. Seeing as the girls wore skirts, Kirin took off his shirt and wrapped the gallbladder in it for safekeeping. Yvonne took the opportunity to touch Kirin's shirtless body and gently caressed his muscles as if she couldn't bear to let go. Kirin felt that he was being teased. He glared at her, but it was useless. She ignored him. Kate stood at the side and saw this. Her heart trembled slightly. She looked at Kirin's strong body and was also a little fascinated. She, too, wanted to touch him. "Let's go." Helpless, Kirin walked towards the end of the snake. The three of them walked for more than 10 minutes before reaching the end of the snake. When they arrived at the end, they saw the ground littered with corpses of various animals. This snake must be hand-fed. Yvonne Quinn looked at Kirin York and voiced her judgment. Kirin York nodded. He was thinking about the Murphy family's motive for raising the snake. Old Murphy had set him up to come here to kill him with a snake. If not for Yvonne's poison, he might have died if he fought this snake. Let's hurry up and find the exit. Kirin began searching the tunnel.